Hi, this is Anitra Brown, editor of the New Orleans Tribune with TRIB Talk, our social media talk show. You can catch us on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. And you're catching us right now with Will Snowden. Thank you so much for joining us, Will. Now, Will, you are a public defender.
Yes.
But that's not why we're here to talk, even though there's probably lots to talk about with regard to that. We're here to talk about the Juror Project.
The Juror Project.
The Juror Project, excuse me.
No worries.
So I've had the occasion to hear you introduce yourself as Will Snowden, founder of the Juror Project, and immediately I was like, what is that? And I asked you, and I was completely intrigued, and that's why I have you here. I want you to tell us more about what the Juror Project is.
Yeah, so I educate the community how to reform their criminal justice system through the jury box. Essentially, the Juror Project is a nonprofit with two main goals. The first goal is to increase diversity of jury panels, and the second is to improve people's perspective of jury duty, because not everybody loves jury duty. Some people try to get out of jury duty, but that's actually part of the problem and not the solution when we talk about ways we can improve our criminal justice system.
Gotcha. I tell you what intrigued me so much, because as much as, I stay in touch and in tune with our criminal justice system, trying to just understanding the pieces and parts of it, and I think most people, we get it from the top to the bottom. Police who arrest, the DA's office who, the sheriff's office who jails and detains, the DA's office who decides to charge, you have the prosecutor, you have public defenders, you have the judge, and we really don't think a lot about the jury.
Nope.
But then at the end of the day, these are the people who decide guilty or not guilty.
Right.
And so they have an extremely profound effect on the criminal justice system. And these aren't, for the most part, lawyers, or they're me. They're, they're everyday people.
Right.
And what we tend to do when we get that summons, like you said, is figure out how to get out.
Exactly.
And
that's part of the problem. And I think what the Juror Project is trying to do is remind the community the power that we have in that jury deliberation room. It was a power given to us for a reason, to keep the system honest, to keep the system fair. But too often we're just kind of shirking the responsibility of the civic duty, even though it's a lot of power that can be used in the right way to make sure our criminal justice system is operating in a fair manner.
Right, and so to be specific and clear, part of what the Juror Project does, you go around to different community groups, organizations, whoever will have you, and you talk about the importance of serving, the importance of jury duty, the role of the jury, and why it is an important part of our criminal justice system. So people who are listening to us right now could go online to
thejurorproject.org.
thejurorproject.org.
They can book us for a presentation, and our presentations are typically about an hour long. And you're absolutely right. We meet with pretty much anyone that is interested in this topic, right? So we've gone to churches, high schools, neighborhood associations, Rotary clubs, law schools, universities, pretty much any gathering of people that have an interest in learning more about this civic duty will come and meet with you.
Okay.
And in the presentations, we do talk about jury duty, but we also talk about our criminal justice system. We talk about the ways that Louisiana has become one of the prison capitals of the world. But we also talk about how Louisiana is one of the exoneration capitals of the world, which means our juries are getting it wrong. So we're really trying to lead this 21st century approach to jury duty to understand that we play a pivotal role in making sure that the right people are being convicted, that the wrong people aren't being convicted, that there's actually fairness in our criminal justice system, and that we're not sentencing people to prison unnecessarily.
Right. So wow, that just, so it's not just about encouraging people to understand the process and to serve, but then to, when they do have that opportunity to serve, making them understand the critical importance of what they're doing, the impact, and even maybe teaching them, and correct me if I'm wrong, teaching them, or at least giving them some guidance on how to navigate that system so that we don't have as many innocent people going to our prisons?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of research that demonstrates the increase in diversity is going to have an impact on the outcomes of those cases. So we familiarize people with that research so they can understand that having more diversity in that room actually leads to more fairness. And so for a quick example, there's a study out of Caddo Parish in Shreveport where an organization looked at 300 plus trials over a 10-year period. And what they were able to recognize is that when there were not more than 2 black folks on the jury, there were 0 acquittals. Right, that's crazy. 10 years, 300 plus trials, not more than 2 black folks, 0 acquittals. But the same research shows when the African American representation increased to 3 or more black people on a jury, the acquittal rate increased to 12%. When there were 5 or more black folks on the jury, the acquittal rate increases to 19%. So that's direct representation that having more diversity in that room is impacting the outcomes of the case. And as a society, we know that it's important for corporations to have diverse boardrooms. It's important for universities to have diverse classrooms. And I think for the sake of the fairness of our criminal justice system, we need to have diverse jury rooms as well.
Absolutely. So the potential to be a juror.
Yeah.
You have to be a registered voter, right?
And either registered to vote or have a state driver's license.
A state driver, absolutely. And so, that's the way to get in. And so, it's something as simple as that to begin with. We need to make sure that everybody who can be registered or be a licensed driver is, so that you can be a part of that potential pool. But one of the things you talked about in terms of diversity, when you talk about diversity, that is, even if you get called for jury duty and you get involved in the process, there are things that happen in the courtroom that kind of decide what that jury looks like outside of who gets called. Is there anything that can happen that we can do to have some impact on that?
Well, I think it's important to understand 2 things. First, I'm going to address your question about that voir dire process, that jury selection process, is that the attorneys are asking particular questions. The main goal of voir dire and jury selection is to find good jurors for this particular case, right? And so if I'm representing somebody that's charged with burglary and I find out that a particular juror, their house was burgled last night, they're probably not the best person for this jury, right? But unfortunately, we do have some prosecutors that will ask questions like, how many of us have had a bad experience with New Orleans Police Department? And inevitably, majority of black folks will raise their hand. They'll talk about those bad experiences, and then the prosecutor will use that as a reason to remove that person for what's called legal cause.
Right.
I see. I don't think that's what our system is really trying to promote when we say you're entitled to a jury of your peers or a fair cross-section of your community. When we talk about promoting diversity through the Juror Project, yes, we're talking about diversity of race, but we're also talking about diversity of experience, diversity of background, diversity of gender, diversity in every sense of the word. And when we discount people's experiences with New Orleans Police Department in a manner that says they aren't going to be a good juror, I think that's really discrediting a lot of the opinions in this community. The Juror Project wants diversity. We want the person who loves New Orleans Police Department on the jury just as much as we want the person who doesn't love New Orleans Police Department on the jury, because we know if those 2 people at opposite ends of the spectrum can come and meet in the middle or wherever it might be and have an actual verdict for the case, we as a society can have so much more faith in that actual decision that's being made. We were also talking about voter registration, DMV records, right? I think that's a flawed way of summoning people for jury duty, right? Not everybody's registered to vote, and not everybody owns a car and has a driver's license. Sure, we can use those lists, but when we look at the actual qualifications to sit on a jury, those lists have absolutely nothing to do with the qualifications. We look at the Louisiana statute, and it says to be a qualified juror, you got to be a United States citizen, 18 years old, and understand the English language. So why are we using lists like DMV records or voter registration that have absolutely nothing to do with our qualifications to summons jurors? And so the problem is, when we use voter registration or DMV records, we're probably excluding around 35% of New Orleanians. That's not the best way to provide somebody with a jury of their peers. And so we need to be thinking about, yes, the current system is requiring us to be registered to vote or to have a driver's license, but how can we improve the system that is going to summons jurors from all across New Orleans without respect to that social status, right? Because you don't have to register to vote, right? If you don't believe in voting, that's your right, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to be on a jury. And so when we look at best practices, we look at the American Bar Association, we also look at the state of Massachusetts. They have something that's called the annual resident list. And essentially they are able to have a census for that parish, in Massachusetts is a county, of the people that are living in that county for that year. And then they summons jurors from that particular list. That's a real-time list of representatives in that particular community. It doesn't have a class element to it, where owning a car might have a class element to it. And it's really it's the best way to get the most representative cross section of the community. So in New Orleans, we don't have an annual resident list, but the Juror Project has had conversations with City Council about thinking what other lists could we use to supplement voter registration, to supplement DMV records. So we have conversations around, utility bills or tax assessor bills or other lists that are used
that
for people in the city.
List of good representation of who's here.
That'll be more inclusive, and that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like the Juror Project is not only educating potential jurors, but also challenging the system in ways that can help bring about the kind of change that you think is needed, right?
Exactly, because we've been doing jury duty the same way for decades, right? And when we talk about Louisiana being one of the prison capitals of the world, we know we're also the exoneration capital of the world, which means our juries are getting it wrong. So it's really a time for us to reconsider how our government should be promoting jury duty, but also how we as a community should be seeing this opportunity. Oftentimes people will say, well, we have lower minority representation because they don't respond to the summonses, or they're not registered to vote, or their names aren't in the DMV record. Well, the Juror Project is calling out two things. One, I think the government can improve the way that we're summoning people. Then we as a community can improve the way that we're responding to this particular call.
Gotcha. Great. So, wow, is there anything I haven't asked you about the Juror Project that you want the folks that are looking at this video right now, this interview right now, to know?
Yeah, well, I think when we talk about jury duty, particularly in the state of Louisiana, we have to mention non-unanimous jury verdicts. So in Louisiana and in Oregon, we have non-unanimous jury verdicts. And when we look kind of where they come from in Louisiana, we dial back to 1898, where there were 138 white delegates essentially trying to figure out what they were going to do with this newly freed slave population, right? And at the time, we all were familiar with the impact slavery had on Louisiana's economy. And when the 13th Amendment removed that labor force, with the exception of criminal punishment, some folks are trying to figure out how are we still going to make money. And so we know about convict leasing, and we know about continuing labor in that fashion. But when we look at the 1898 Constitutional Convention, there's an individual by the name of Thomas Sims who says, the purpose of this convention is to promote the Anglo-Saxon race, right? And a product of that convention that's supposed to promote the Anglo-Saxon race are non-unanimous jury verdicts. And at the time, it was a 9-3 threshold, which means 9 people could vote guilty,
right?
3 people could vote not guilty, and that person is still going to prison, right? And then we fast forward to 1974, and it changes. Now it's 10-2. The problem that we need to be concerned about with non-unanimous jury verdicts in our criminal justice system is that they were originally created to nullify the black vote, right? And so at the time when blacks got the right to vote, through the 15th Amendment, they also got the right to be on a jury.
Right.
And so the concern was, well, if these black folks were able to get on a jury, then they can kind of mess up how we want to carry our sense of criminal justice. And so even if there were 3 black people on the jury, and there were 9 white folks, the 3 black folks wouldn't count because all they would need is 9.
Right.
And I mentioned that it's in Louisiana and Oregon. So Louisiana, it's a vestige of Jim Crow. It is rooted in racism and trying to nullify the black vote, making it easier to convict black folks. In Oregon, it's rooted in anti-Semitism, right? And so when we look kind of on a global scale, where these non-unanimous verdicts exist in our criminal justice system nationally, both are rooted in hate.
Yeah, and I haven't seen it. I don't see the numbers. I don't know the numbers, but I would almost bet that if you look at some of these exoneration rates in these areas where jurors are getting it wrong, they may be connected to non-unanimous verdicts.
11 people so far have been exonerated that were convicted by non-unanimous verdicts.
Yeah.
So what that means, at the time of the trial, there were 2 people that actually got it right.
Yeah.
And due to work of the Innocence Project and other organizations, those 2 jurors that were in the minority when they voted for innocence or guilt, they actually voted that the person was not guilty. They were actually got it right, but it wasn't revealed 20, 30 years later down the road.
Wow. So yeah, there is so much, I think, conversation that needs to be had around our jury system as an extremely important part of our criminal justice system, which is why I think it's so important what the Juror Project is doing. And again, tell our viewers where they can go to learn more about the Juror Project.
All of our information can be found on our website, www.thejurorproject.org. We're also on all social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and the handle is @JurorProject if you need to reach out to us. We also like to promote the hashtag, or the idea and the campaign of Jury Duty is My Duty, which essentially empowers the individual to understand the impact that they can have on the criminal justice system.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Will.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us. Again, this is TRIB Talk. Catch us on Facebook and YouTube.